You're watching the DSP Leaders Summit on Edgeonomics, which looks at the operator economics that support the distributed telco cloud or telco edge. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content at Telecom TV, and today's panel discussion is on how telcos and the hyperscalers can work together at the edge. Now, major telcos have been forging strategic edge partnerships with AWS, Azure, Google Cloud over the past few years. But what does this mean for the telcos and their public cloud partners, and indeed the wider telecoms ecosystem? And what will be the impact on end users and application developers? Well, let me first introduce our panelists. And joining us from Boston in the US is Beth Cohen, SDN Product Strategies at Verizon. From Madrid in Spain, we welcome back Sergio Gonzalez, who is Lead Cloud Architect at Microsoft. And joining us from Toronto in Canada is Patrick Lopez, founder and CEO of Core Analysis. Hello everyone, and good to see you all again. An opening question for all of you, and Beth, I think I'm going to ask this one of you first. What can the hyperscale companies bring to the telcos that the telcos themselves can't provide?
So the telcos are really good at networking. However, their strength at the hyperscalers bring the ability to deliver public cloud, massive public cloud, which is something that the telcos have not historically been very good at. In fact, actually, I believe, well, certainly Verizon's out of that business as of a couple of years ago, and I believe the others have as well for the most part. So what that means is that it's actually a very synergistic combination with the hyperscalers because they bring the ability to deliver massive amounts of cloud infrastructure, while we bring the massive amounts of network to support the end users.
Great. And Sergio, from your perspective, what are you seeing that the hyperscalers can provide the telcos that the telcos can't do for themselves?
So, well, I would extremely agree on what Beth said. It's about merging ecosystems. In the hyperscaler space, we see very strong developer ecosystems, companies that they implement their applications, startups. They deploy very innovative solutions on the hyperscale cloud. Telcos, on the other hand, they have the best possible network. So these two things combined, and the best networks with the best ecosystem of applications can bring the next generation of connected use cases. Additionally, we see that telcos have very strong relationships, especially with the public administration, SMB market, all kind of sectors. So for the hyperscaler, is also a great go-to-market partner for moving into different market spaces.
Great. And Patrick, from your independent, your neutral perspective, what are you seeing?
Well, I think that if we're looking generally at cloud providers, they have a number of attributes that telcos don't have. The first one is most of them are global, and therefore they can not only reach, but also provide a backbone for development in a global scale, which is important as we see that digital services basically are no longer really localized. You have a number of service providers that end up having an offering that is global, and that's why they're relying on cloud providers. And of course, their ecosystem in terms of developers that are able to create services on a global scale. And at last, I think it's been said, the telcos haven't been really great at creating a cloud offering, and the level of automation, the level of product lifecycle management that the cloud providers bring is actually a step up from an engineering perspective over the telco infrastructure. And it allows to deploy and to manage at scale digital services in a much more economical and in a faster fashion.
Thank you, Patrick. As we evolve, as the business evolves, the digital services provider market, we've just been talking about how telcos and hyperscalers, there appears to be this need for each other. Beth, could this be a lifelong relationship, or is this more of a casual fling that suits the immediate purposes of both sides?
I really think that we do really need each other, because we really are two sides of the equation. So the hyperscalers, as was mentioned in the earlier question, really have the power of the developer community. They really understand how to support application development. The developers trust them, are comfortable with them, and developers traditionally don't understand much about networks. And the telcos traditionally don't understand much about applications. Now that's changing over time, as the telcos realize that they need to become integrators, and I've said this a number of times more. However, the hyperscalers are still obviously offering that platform that, as was mentioned earlier, the telcos literally can't do. On the other hand, the hyperscalers cannot have that I mean, Verizon's a global company, obviously, and there are other global telcos, and that what I have found is that the hyperscalers don't really understand networking and networks as deeply as the telcos. That's our business, of course, and particularly around the edge, as things are moving out to the edge, and the applications are splitting up in interesting ways. That is causing we really have to be in bed with each other, so to speak.
Well, Patrick, are we in this for the long haul together? Is this a relationship that will go the distance, or is it just serving the needs of the moment?
I think if we look at the evolution of the cloud, we've seen that over time it has grown in scale and has provided global services. And the limitations of the cloud so far has been what we call the last mile connectivity, which is basically being able to provide a quality of service that ends up being managed and being reliable from the device, your phone, your TV, all the way to the cloud without interruption, without changes in quality. And that is only achievable if you integrate tightly with the connectivity providers. And I think that let's say the first generation of cloud services were able to rely on a good enough connectivity service. And we see that the explosion of, the services that we're doing right now, video conferencing, the collaboration, remote collaboration, even working on office application remotely works quite well. But as we're moving forward, there are a number of use cases, a number of new services that require an even better connectivity control. And I mean, everyone knows about futuristic services like managing drones or fleets of independent vehicles, or collaborating robots in a manufacturing environment. All those application and use cases require a tight control of the connectivity. And that's only possible if the cloud that provides the application and a computing resource and the connectivity provider, the operator, work together to ensure that end-to-end, from the factory, from your home, from your vehicle, all the way to the cloud, the connectivity is managed carefully and basically without interruption or without changes. That requires collaboration that goes beyond short term. I think it's for the long haul.
And Sergio, we've heard so far about the need for tighter integration. We've heard the need to understand both sets of companies' business models and market knowledge. Are we in this for the long term? Is this the sign of things to come?
Yes, certainly. Moving into the next generation of connected services, telcos are going to require agility and are going to require react fast to changes, because the ecosystems are going to accelerate and happen at a very fast pace. So the cloud can give also operators this vehicle of agility that they need in order to capture different market spaces. On the other side, the cloud next generation services that require very high quality networks do need a strong operator space, consolidated next generation networks for those use cases to happen. It is impossible to think of today's modern cloud without massive 4G rollout or fiber. We wouldn't be talking about the degree of hyperscale cloud at this point with 3G wireless connectivity or copper XDSL at this point in time. Moving forward, when you look at next generation use cases, connected factories, connected vehicles, you really need this high quality network as a barrier for those use cases to happen. So it's extremely synergistic.
Beth, you want to add a comment?
Yes, I did want to add a comment. So I'd say one of the big success stories was, which highlights the importance of the telco in this ecosystem, is the recent response to everybody working from home, right? So that there was a massive change in how the network traffic was routing through the network. And the telcos, and I know Verizon was one of them, that were able to pivot very quickly and change the traffic patterns to support the massive shift in where the traffic was coming from and how it was so much more distributed than it was before. So I would say that highlights the ability of the telcos to pivot very quickly with rapid change in the requirements.
Now, when we talk about hyperscalers, it's a bit lazy of us and me to sort of group them all together. They've all got different strengths and capabilities. Patrick, do these companies? Yes, they're all global and they've got global offerings, but do they have particular strengths? Are there particular unique features of each one?
Well, I think we have to look at where they're coming from. And if we look at an Amazon, who has historically grown from basically creating its cloud for its own purpose, for its own infrastructure and for its own services, and then little by little opening the crowd to an ecosystem of developers. I think they see that relationship with telecoms very much the same way. They see the need for them to expand their cloud closer to the developer and closer to the user, and that is being done by collaboration at the edge with their Outpost and Wavelength offering. So their mission probably is to expand the capabilities of their cloud and provide a better user experience by integrating with the connectivity layer. By contrast, and Sergio probably definitely has a better view and perspective than I do, but if I look at a high level, Microsoft is a provider of services and products in the IT world, and I believe that from their perspective, moving into the edge and the telco world is a natural extension of their product offering. So I believe that providing the infrastructure for edge connectivity and providing the operating system for the edge connectivity is something that probably Microsoft value very, very much. And if we're looking at other cloud offering and providers, I mean, we see that Google, that has started a little later than the other providers, has been able to make some inroad with a very different model. Where basically their Kubernetes contribution to the ecosystem has really changed the way we think at the cloud fabric. And because it is mainly an open source based offering, it offers the tools to create a cloud, bring your own cloud and create your cloud as you need it. So you see three quite different approach from the main hyperscalers. And I think that if we expand a little further and we talk about Tencent and Alibaba and even Rakuten, who is by all intents and purposes creating a cloud that's telco specific, we start seeing fairly different strategies as well as different positioning for their cloud offering.
Great, thanks Patrick, and yes indeed we ought to be expanding our coverage here away from just that gang of three. Let's move on to logistics. Sergio, if we agree that we're in this for the long haul, then to what extent might the physical infrastructures of telcos and their hyperscale partners become integrated? Do we have any clarity yet about how this may actually get put into commercial service?
Yeah, well, certainly. I can speak by Microsoft. We recently announced our joint offering with operators. For example, Azure Edge Zones by carrier, we would integrate our infrastructure with the infrastructure operator, allowing cloud services benefit from the operator edge access last mile, close range connectivity. So consistency, it has been said in this forum, is key. Allowing the same set of APIs for developers, for application to expand to the edge is key. And in that sense, we are bringing those appliances towards the operator's edge, and orchestrators from the cloud will benefit from the connectivity that the operator brings.
Great. And Beth, have you got any insights into just how far and to what extent we're going to see, likely to see this integration of infrastructure?
So I'll answer that there's really two pieces of integration that need to happen. There's the integration where the cloud provider is, or the hyperscaler is locating equipment inside the telcos, POPs, or points of presence, and that's already happening. Obviously, we announced recently, excuse me, the AWS Wavelength partnership, where AWS's Wavelength is in fact hosted. But there's also the other component of edge, which is the far edge, which is not owned by either the telcos or by the hyperscalers. Yet there's a lot of reason to bring the edge all the way out to the customer edge, out into the customer stations, or in the case of telematics and drones and other types of things that rely on the wireless network, that those need to be incorporated into the wireless network's edges. So I see that as the integration is happening at two levels, at the regional POPs and also at the far edge as well.
Great. Sergio.
Yes, I would also add, I fully agree with Beth. The customer premises are going to get deployed equipment from the hyperscaler that would benefit from private connectivity potentially provided by a global operator. But additionally, the devices. If we look at the next generation devices, we're not talking about a smartphone, but we're talking about a smart car. That car requires connectivity, and especially when securing and making sure that fleet of potential billions of devices do not get exposed and do get properly secure. For example, Microsoft have been doing investments in implementing device cybersecurity modules that make sure that those next generation user equipments are safe, are secure, and can be managed in a proper manner. So I can talk about Azure Sphere, real-time operating system investments and developments that help manufacturers' ecosystem of next generation devices create those secure and fully managed user equipments of the future.
Thanks. And Patrick, you wanted to come in with a comment as well.
Certainly. I think that when we're talking about integration, there are different level of integration and different reasons for integrating. One of those is certainly that in the long term, there are a lot of different edges in terms of where they are in the network. And I think if we are talking about the far edge, so closer to the user in their home or in an antenna, or even in a very small central office, we see that possibly the current path of some of the hyperscaler to try to deploy their own appliances and infrastructure is not going to be really feasible and scalable for many operators, in the sense that in a lot of those areas, the real estate is limited. And I think many operators would be hard pressed to think that they could deploy 1, 2, or 3 different appliances from different vendors, plus their own, in order to serve an edge computing experience that will be homogeneous. So from an integration standpoint, I think even though it is early, it is necessary for telcos and hyperscaler to think about an integration model where you will have a true multi-tenant architecture, so that all clouds can coexist in one location without having to deploy different infrastructure for different providers.
Thanks. And Beth?
So I wanted to pick up on that because, as a telco, we see the traffic patterns with our customers, and multi-cloud is very definitely the name of the game. So we see a lot of our customers are using multi-cloud. So the ability to put 3 or 4 appliances from each of the cloud providers is obviously unfeasible. So that's something that we are, as a telco, addressing directly to help our customers be able to easily incorporate multiple clouds into their solutions, because that's what the customers are demanding.
I've got a couple of questions to round the discussion off. We've been discussing the move to cloud native at great length here on Telecom TV, and we'll continue to do so because it's very important. Beth, you've been with us on a number of the cloud native sessions. One of the key takeaways has been the challenge of people and processes. Do you think there could be a culture shock here between telcos and the hyperscale partners that could negatively impact the new partnerships?
Well, I'd say yes and no. I'd say, we've been delivering software-defined networking for a number of years now. So the culture shock, certainly, I've talked about it in the past, the culture shock of switching to the software-defined, in the software-defined world has certainly impacted our operations. But however, we have kind of gotten past that. So our operations people and our operations systems do in fact support the virtualized services. The next impact, of course, is cloud native and the containerized solutions, which is something I think the hyperscalers are ahead of us on that, partially because the network services only some of them have converted. So I think there's going to be a big revolution over the next couple of years. And, we welcome that the hypervisor, the hyperscalers, have embraced cloud native and containerized and microservices, a lot faster than the telcos have. and for a number of reasons. So, but I think that's going to change over the next 18 months or so.
Patrick, what's your thoughts on this? Because we've been talking about technology a lot. Do you think culture and skills, and especially cloud skills and cloud native skills, might have a negative impact here?
I think it's probably the greatest challenge, the culture and the processes and the methodology and the tools, rather than the technology itself. In the sense that you have cloud native technology that is designed to be automated at scale, that is designed for the creation of pipeline and the rapid iteration of innovative changes. And on one hand, and on the other hand, you have in many cases a telco organization that is designed and that is rewarded on not changing or on doing the smallest amount of change at the time, because a telecom network is very complex. It has literally hundreds, if not thousands of suppliers. Those stacks are mostly still proprietary and vertical, where you have still a number of appliances that are managed individually rather than basically managed layers and fabrics and domains. And that leads basically to a change control and a risk control that is very different from the cloud native. And it's not only a matter of technology, it's also a matter of culture. As we know, telcos are regulated. They are, in most countries, a critical provider of services. And therefore, the constraints that the regulators put on telco environment in terms of availability and in terms of uptime are in many cases different from the hyperscaler and their services, which leads to a different infrastructure management, a different orchestration management and automation management. So even though we see little by little cloud native tools taking hold in the telco environment, the cloud native culture and the cloud native processes and methodologies have, in any case, to be adapted a little bit in order to be able to be workable in telco. And that is just, I think, the nature of the beast.
And Sergio, could culture be the major challenge to all this? Could the hyperscalers become too frustrated by the divide they see in telcos, especially the tier 2 and tier 3 telcos? It's okay for some of the tier 1 telcos, especially the large ones who have got to grips with this, but many haven't yet.
Well, what I see is that telcos more and more are starting to realize this need for agility and for change, and they are in the process, as Patrick said, they are slowly adopting. So I don't think there are many telcos out there that don't realize the need for being more agile. Of course, this is a 130-year-old industry, so there is some inertia, so there are some processes to be changed. But certainly, in my humble opinion, I see cloud native as the toolkit for high speed and frequent change. So there was a great presentation from our CTO on how Microsoft managed the explosion of, for example, Microsoft Teams usage during the pandemic. Under heavy fire, under an avalanche of traffic, we were upgrading frequently. I mean, when I say frequently, every hour, our connected services, and that's a huge learning. I mean, you have to design with resiliency in mind. You have to design services that gracefully degrade if required under a heavy spoke of traffic. So that requires a paradigm shift. I think telcos still need to work in that space, but they are starting to do so, and more important, they are realizing the need for the change.
Great, and this leads us very nicely to the final question for today. Beth, what does this ultimately mean? What does this relationship ultimately mean for application development innovation? Could this, I mean, this would appear to be the key to making all this work.
Well, I think it's very important to create an ecosystem, and I think that ecosystem is just in its infancy at this point, and the ecosystem has to be that partnership between the hyperscalers and the telcos in support of the developers. And it's not just the developers; it's also the systems integrators and the enterprise as well, as they are developing new applications and new ways of delivering applications. and some of these applications are, changes to existing types of applications like point of sale systems and inventory systems and ERP systems. But I think it goes well beyond that. And what we really need to do is create an ecosystem that the developer community and the startups and the entrepreneurs can really use as their platform to create new applications we haven't even thought of yet. And that's what I think we're struggling with now, which is, particularly as we roll out 5G and and IoT and all these other types of new technologies. They're kind of like technologies that are looking for applications, and I am sure those applications are coming, but that ecosystem has to support them, and the developers need to have the tools. Developers traditionally are not much aware of how the network works, and as we roll out to the edge, the application is affected by the network in ways that the developers have not needed to worry about in the past. So, as a telco, we need to provide those tools that the developers can use to optimize their applications. And the hyperscalers need to provide the platform at the edge to also support those edge applications. So it really needs to be a synergy within the ecosystem. I'm excited because I think that's, a lot of stuff is happening in that space.
Oh, there's so much happening at the moment. It's how can anyone not be excited at the moment? There is so much to get on board and develop. Patrick, do you think it's the telco's responsibility and the hyperscalers to encourage innovation within apps development and to foster and promote this new ecosystem?
I believe it is mostly telcos in the sense that hyperscalers by design have been open to the developer community, and they've done a great job creating APIs and tools that allow to create cloud native services. But by contrast, many network operators, not many network operators, the industry of telco has been designed as a collection of black boxes. The industry has failed to provide APIs to allow developers to recognize and consume resources that the network could provide. So they ended up designing their application by abstracting what the network would do and circumvent it to some degree. But at a high level, there are many services and many data points that carriers, operators could provide to developers that would be useful. For instance, location, precise location. I'm reminded of this use case where you have gaming companies that are rewarding the user by going to specific locations in order to collect characters, and that, if you are using an Android phone, can be spoofed. It could be spoofed by just changing a few parameters in the phone to make the application believe that the user is somewhere that is not. And that leads to real cost impact for the application providers. If the application provider were able to extract from the network, from the telco, the precise location of the user, it would be able to counteract those spoofs and actually reduce the amount of fraud. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of use cases that are very comparable, where developers need to have a better understanding and a better access of the network the telco network functions, but the APIs are either not there or not very easy to access to. And that's what I'm expecting from the collaboration between the hyperscalers and the telco, providing the developer community with a number of APIs to be able to consume telco functions that are otherwise hidden at this point.
Great. And Sergio, I'm going to come to you for final comments on this one. Do you see these new relationships between telcos and hyperscalers at the edge as being positive for app development innovation?
Yeah, extremely positive. So when we want to bring innovation to the edge, we want to enable innovation at low latency. We really need this synergy. So commenting on the importance of APIs, I think this is critical. As Beth said in her comments, typically developers are not good at network complexity. So the first thing you really need is a set of consistent APIs, on top of which a good collection of SDKs can happen for those automation tools to appear. Those tools are typically used by developers to stay away from complexity, so they can really focus on their core capability and their core asset that is potentially not how to say. The more seamless networks work for a developer, the better, so they can stay focused on the real challenges that the application is trying to solve.
Thank you, Sergio. And that is all the time we have, unfortunately. Let's hope we can continue this discussion later. But for now, thank you all very much for joining us. A reminder that we have many more interviews, panel discussions and analysis programs as part of the Edgenomics Summit, and they are all here to view on Telecom TV. We also have a live Q&A program which is scheduled for 4:30 p.m. UK time today, where we will be taking your questions. There's a form here on the website that you can use to submit them. There's also a link for you to add the session to your calendar and receive a local time zone reminder. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and we hope to see you again soon.